Hi there. Welcome to the 10-Minute Analyst, where we turn complex institutional research into intelligence you can actually use.
Every week, we dissect the latest reports from banks, summarizing the charts, the data, and the bottom line into a concise podcast and visual deck.
It's open-source intelligence for the modern professional. Now let's dive in.
Usually when we talk about a tech release window, it's a pretty polite, orderly affair. Apple drops a new phone in September. Google does a big update in May. It's all very scheduled.
Right. It's a calendar invite you see coming from like 6 months away.
Exactly. But what we're looking at right now, mid-February 2026 in the Chinese tech sector is, well, it's the exact opposite of polite. It's a crowded, chaotic, absolute sprint.
It's a stampede.
Yeah.
It really is. It feels less like a product launch and more like everyone trying to get through the same revolving door at the same time.
And to try and make some sense of all this chaos, we're doing a deep dive into a really fresh equity research report from JP It's dated February 11th, 2026, and it's just called China, Internet, and AI.
And, for a bank report, it reads like a dispatch from the front lines of a war. It's surprisingly dramatic.
It is, because what they're arguing here isn't just, a list of new apps. They're saying we are seeing a fundamental regime change, a change in how AI is built, how it's sold, and frankly, who's actually going to make money from it.
That's the core of it. The report identifies this big shift from what they call model narratives to deployment decisions.
Okay, that sounds a little corporate. Let's break that down. What does that actually mean?
Well, think of it like this. For the last couple of years, the whole AI game has been about model narratives. It was a vanity contest.
Right. Who has the highest score in the bar exam? Can your bot write a better sonnet than my bot?
Precisely. It was all theoretical capability. Top trumps for nerds, basically. But JP is saying that era is over. Now it's about deployment decisions.
So not how smart is it, but
is it cheap enough and fast enough that I can actually run it in a real business without going bankrupt? It's the difference between a science fair project and a factory floor.
That's a great analogy. So let's look at this crowded pipeline. The report says all these launches are clustered right before the Chinese New Year. Why then?
Because in China, the Spring Festival is the Super Bowl for user acquisition. It is the single best distribution window for any consumer tech.
Because everyone's off work, glued to their phones.
Exactly. They're bored, they're sharing content, red packets, funny videos. If you can drop a viral AI tool right in that window, your user acquisition cost just plummets.
It's a land grab.
A total land grab. And the company that seems to be grabbing the most, according to this report at least, is ByteDance.
The TikTok creators, they never stop.
They really don't. And they're not just releasing one model. They're dropping what JP calls a 3-model stack. It is a seriously aggressive move.
Okay, what's in the stack?
So first, on February 8th, they pre-released Seedance 2.0. That's their video generation model.
Okay.
Then the very next day, they dropped Seedream 5.0 for images.
Yeah.
And they still have Doubao 2.0, their big language model, waiting in the wings for the holiday.
A full court press. I want to go back to that video model, though, Seedance. The report flags something about multi-shot consistency that sounds like a big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal for creators.
Because, with most AI video tools, you can generate a great 3-second clip. But if you ask for a second shot of the same person, they look totally different.
Right. The AI has no object permanence. It just hallucinates a new face every time.
Yeah.
But the early signals with Seedance suggest ByteDance might have cracked that. They can keep a character consistent across different shots, different angles.
Which takes it from a fun toy to an actual production tool. You can create a narrative.
Right. And that's pure ByteDance DNA. But while they're making all this noise, another launch happened that was, well, it was much quieter. And kind of cooler, actually.
You're talking about Pony Alpha. I love this part of the report. It's like a spy thriller.
It really is. So imagine you're a developer. You're on OpenRouter, which is basically a marketplace for testing AI models.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, this new option just appears. It's just labeled Pony Alpha.
Yeah.
No company name, no logo, nothing.
A ghost model.
Total ghost model. But developers start running code through it, really complex stuff, and the results are just shocking. It's handling huge amounts of context, debugging scripts, and it's fast.
And no one knows who built it.
Nobody. The forums go crazy. Is it a secret OpenAI project? Is it Google? It's a total blind taste test. And then on February 11th, Zhipu AI steps forward and says, that was us. That's our new GLM 5.0.
Wow, that's a flex. We're so confident we don't even need our name on the label.
It's a huge flex. They wanted the metrics to speak for themselves. And JP Morgan points out this model is aimed squarely at frontier coding. They're not building a chatty friend, they're building a workhorse for engineers.
So you have ByteDance going for viral consumers, Zhipu for the pro developers. What about the old guard, like Alibaba?
You can't count them out. They're getting Kun 3.5 ready, but Alibaba's playing a different game. They're not using stealth or viral videos, they're using brute force capital. The report mentions a 3 billion RMB incentive plan.
3 billion just to get users.
Just to get people in the door. They're basically paying people to try their tools. It's a war chest strategy.
Okay, so that's the landscape. But I want to pivot now to what's underneath all this. Because there's another player, DeepSeek, that seems to be changing the actual physics of the industry. The report calls it the DeepSeek CNY effect.
And this is really the core of that deployment decision idea we started with. DeepSeek is releasing their V4 model, and they've taken a very, very different philosophical stance.
How so?
Yeah, well, for a long time, the goal for, say, OpenAI or Google was make it smarter, whatever the cost. More power, more data, more compute.
Right.
DeepSeek is saying, no, that's the wrong goal. They're prioritizing what they call serving economics.
Serving economics. Okay, translate that jargon for us.
It's basically,
Right.
how much does it cost me, the company, every
Yeah.
single time you ask a question? If my super genius AI costs $1 in electricity to tell you the weather, I have a terrible business. DeepSeek wants to get that cost as close to zero as possible.
And they're doing that with a technical breakthrough, right? The report goes deep on their paper about conditional memory and these things called engrams.
Yes, this is the technical meat of it, and it is fascinating.
It's pretty dense stuff. I think we need an analogy here to visualize what's actually happening inside the model that makes it so much cheaper.
Okay, let's try this. Imagine you're a world-class chef,
I am a chef. Got it.
and a customer orders a beef Wellington. In a traditional AI model, what they call a dense model, every time that order comes in, you basically have to reinvent the recipe from first principles.
Every single time.
Every single time.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the chemistry of the pastry, the thermodynamics of the beef. You are using your entire brain to derive beef Wellington.
That sounds incredibly slow and exhausting. I'd never get any food out.
It is. It wastes a huge amount of what they call representational bandwidth, your brain power, on stuff that never changes.
So what's the DeepSeek model doing differently?
The DeepSeek model has a cookbook right next to the stove. They call it a memory module. When the order comes in, the model realizes, wait, I've seen this pattern 1,000,000 times. It doesn't rederive the chemistry. It just looks up the beef Wellington page in its book and executes.
So it's trading computation for retrieval?
Exactly. It's swapping thinking for looking up. In the paper, they call these saved patterns enneagrams. So instead of reconstructing a common line of code or a math formula, it just retrieves the enneagram.
So instead of the whole brain lighting up, only the tiny part of the brain that knows how to read the cookbook lights up.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's what they mean by sparse attention. You're only activating a tiny necessary fraction of the neural network.
And that gets us back to the economics. Less brain power means less electricity.
Much less electricity, much less time. The report says it lets them get quality gains without a brute force compute step up. You get a model that performs as if it's smarter, but it's radically cheaper to run.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here.
Go for it.
Isn't that kind of cheating?
Hey, how do you mean?
Well, if I'm just looking up the answer in the back of the textbook, I'm not really learning the math. If the AI is just retrieving these engrams, is it actually intelligent? Or is it just a really fast parrot with a great filing system?
That is the big philosophical question, isn't it? But from an engineering and business standpoint, JP Morgan basically asks, does it matter? If the AI gives you perfect code instantly because it remembered it instead of thinking about it, the result for you, the user, is the same.
Fair point. The customer doesn't care how the beef Wellington was made, just that it's delicious and cheap.
Exactly. And that leads us to the winners and losers. Because if DeepSeek makes AI dirt cheap, it completely rearranges the board.
Right, let's talk about that. The report had a really surprising take on Tencent. You'd think, oh, they don't have the flashiest model, so they lose. But JP Morgan says the opposite is true.
Yeah, they see this whole DeepSeek effect as broadly constructive for Tencent.
Why? If they're not winning the model arms race, how do they win the war?
Because it's not about having the best model. It's about owning the real estate.
The digital real estate.
Exactly. They are the landlord. They own Wixen, right? WeChat. They own the ecosystem where 1 billion people live. If AI becomes a cheap utility, like water, Tencent can just pipe it into every single chat window without going broke.
Ah, I see. They don't have to build the power plant. They just have to wire all the houses.
You've got it. Better, cheaper AI means people stay on WeChat longer. Higher retention equals more money. They capture the value without having to actually win the foundational model race.
So the landlords win. What about the people selling the actual power? What about Alibaba Cloud and Baidu?
That is a much, much tougher picture in this report.
Yeah.
JP Morgan is pretty cautious there.
Because they're the ones selling the API access, the compute time.
Right. They're the cloud providers. They make money when companies pay them to run these big, expensive models. But if DeepSeek is proving you can run them for a fraction of the cost.
It starts a price war.
A brutal one. The report explicitly warns about industry-wide pricing pressure. If the market expectation shifts to intelligence should be cheap, then selling AI as a service becomes a very low-margin business.
A race to the bottom.
It is. But there's another group of winners here. The vertical leaders. Companies like Trip.com in travel or Meituan in food delivery.
Okay, why them?
Because their biggest fear was always vendor lock-in.
Yep.
Imagine building your whole travel business on OpenAI, and then OpenAI doubles the price overnight. You're a hostage.
You'd have nowhere else to go.
But with a strong open-source ecosystem, driven by efficient models like DeepSeek's, they have options. They can take a cheap, powerful model, fine-tune it on their own data, and run it themselves. It shifts power from the model maker to the model user.
It really feels like the whole power balance is shifting. But
Yeah.
let's zoom out for a second. There's always this question when we talk about Chinese AI. Okay, it's cheap, but is it actually as good as GPT-5 or Google's latest model?
And JP Morgan is pretty honest about this. Their base case is that, yes, China still lags the global frontier, meaning the best models from the US in broad general intelligence.
So they're not claiming it's a tie yet.
No, but, and this is a big but, they introduced this idea of the right tail upside.
Right tail. That's a stats term. What do they mean by that here?
Well, in a normal distribution, the tail is the extreme outlier outcome. The right tail scenario here is that while the average Chinese model might be a little behind, certain models in specific areas like Zhipu's coding model or ByteDance's video model could shoot way past expectations.
And the argument is, what if one of those models is maybe 90% as good as GPT-5, but because of something like conditional memory, it's 80% cheaper to run?
Exactly. I mean, if you're a developer running millions of lines of code through a debugger every day, you don't need a poet. You need a workhorse. You'll take the 90% smart model that saves you half your budget every single time.
Right. It's the good enough revolution. We saw it with solar panels. We saw it with EVs.
And now we could be seeing it with intelligence itself. It's the industrialization of AI.
So to wrap this all up, what we're seeing in this chaotic week in February is more than just a bunch of new apps. There's a tectonic shift happening underneath.
Yeah, we're moving out of the magic show era of AI. It's not about dazzling you with a one-off trick anymore. It's about utility.
It's about who can deliver reliable intelligence at the lowest possible cost. And companies like DeepSeek are rewriting the rules, shifting the goal from thinking hard to remembering well.
And that shift from narrative to economics is going to decide who wins the next 5 years. It's not about who has the biggest brain anymore. It's about who has the most efficient business.
You know, it leaves me with one final question, though. We use that cookbook analogy for DeepSeek's model.
Right, with the anagrams.
If the big efficiency game comes from looking up answers instead of deriving them, are we accidentally building a ceiling on AI? If we optimize everything for remembering the past efficiently, are we discouraging the AI from ever thinking of something genuinely new?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? In the race to make AI cheap, are we giving up on the race to make it truly creative? Can you innovate just by looking up what's already been done?
Something to think about. Thanks for the deep dive.
Thanks for listening.